At Thanksgiving, every sibling was thanked in a speech except me. I smiled, took a photo, and slipped out. That evening, my mom called sobbing after reading my caption. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how one Thanksgiving dinner changed everything between me and my family forever. For context, I'm the middle child of 5 siblings. There's Marcus, 35, the golden boy who became a doctor and married his college sweetheart. Then there's me, 32, followed by twins Jessica and Jennifer, 29, who are both successful lawyers, and finally baby brother David, 26, who just got promoted to senior marketing manager at a Fortune 500 company. Growing up, I was always the odd one out. While my siblings excelled in traditional ways, academics, sports, leadership roles, I was the creative one. I spent my afternoons writing stories, painting, and dreaming of becoming an author. My parents weren't exactly discouraging, but they weren't encouraging either. They'd smile politely when I shared my latest short story or showed them a painting, then immediately pivot to discussing Marcus's latest medical achievement or the twins' debate team victories. After college, while my siblings climbed corporate ladders and earned impressive salaries, I struggled as a freelance writer. I published articles here and there, worked on a novel that never quite got finished, and supplemented my income with part-time jobs that barely paid the bills. My family's response to my career choice ranged from concerned suggestions that I get a real job to outright dismissal of my work as just a hobby. 3 years ago, something incredible happened. I finally finished my novel, a psychological thriller that I poured my heart and soul into. After months of rejections, a small but respected publishing house picked it up. The advance wasn't life-changing money, but it was validation that someone believed in my work. The book was published quietly, without much fanfare, but I was proud of it. When I told my family about the book deal, their reactions were lukewarm at best. Mom said, "That's nice, honey," in the same tone she'd use if I told her I'd organize my closet. Dad nodded and asked if it would be available at the library. Marcus patted my shoulder and said, "Good for you, Sarah. Maybe now you can start thinking about a more stable career." The twins exchanged a look that clearly said they thought I was still playing pretend, and David was too busy on his phone to really respond. But I didn't let their lack of enthusiasm dim my excitement. My book started gaining traction through word of mouth and social media. Readers were connecting with it in ways I'd never imagined. Book clubs were selecting it. Bloggers were writing reviews. Small bookstores were featuring it in their windows. Then, 6 months after publication, something extraordinary happened. My book was nominated for the Edgar Award, one of the most prestigious awards in mystery writing. I couldn't believe it. I called my parents immediately, crying with joy, trying to explain what this meant. The Edgar nomination was like getting an Oscar nomination for writers in my genre. It was recognition from my peers, from the industry, that my work mattered. Mom's response, "Oh, that's wonderful, sweetheart. Hey, did I tell you that Jessica just made partner at her firm?" That should have been my first real warning sign, but I brushed it off. They didn't understand my world, I told myself. They couldn't grasp what this nomination meant because writing wasn't their field. 2 months later, I didn't win the Edgar, but something even better happened. My book hit the New York Times bestseller list. Not just any list, it debuted at number 7 on the hardcover fiction list. I was officially a best-selling author. I drove to my parents' house that same day, clutching the newspaper with my book listed among titles by authors I'd been reading and admiring for years. I was shaking with excitement as I knocked on their door. Dad opened it and immediately launched into a story about David's promotion before I could even show him the newspaper. When I finally managed to interrupt and show them the bestseller list, Mom glanced at it and said, "Oh, how nice. You know, Mrs. Henderson from down the street also had a book published recently. Maybe you two should get together and compare notes." Mrs. Henderson had self-published a cookbook of family recipes. It wasn't even comparable, but I bit my tongue. The real kicker came a month later when my book was optioned for a Netflix series. A major streaming service wanted to turn my novel into a limited series. The option payment alone was more money than I'd made in the previous 3 years combined, and if the series got made, I'd be set financially for life. I called a family dinner to share the news. I even offered to cook, which I never do because I'm admittedly terrible in the kitchen. I wanted this to be special. I wanted them to understand that their daughter, the one they'd always seen as the dreamy underachiever, had actually made it. During dinner, I waited for the right moment and then announced my news. I have something incredible to share with all of you. Netflix has optioned my book for a series adaptation. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Marcus cleared his throat and said, "That's great, Sarah. What does option mean exactly? Like, is it definitely going to happen?" I explained the process, how options work, what it could lead to. The twins seemed more interested in their phones than my explanation. David asked if I'd get to meet any celebrities. Mom patted my hand and said, "Well, isn't that something?" then immediately changed the subject to ask Jessica about her latest case. That night, I went home and cried harder than I had since my teenage years. It wasn't just disappointment, it was a deep, crushing realization that no matter what I achieved, my family would never see me as successful. I wasn't the doctor, the lawyers, or the corporate executive. I was just Sarah, playing dress-up in the grown-up world. But life went on. The Netflix series got greenlit and went into production. My book continued selling well, and I was already working on my second novel with a much larger advance from a major publisher. I was invited to literary festivals, interviewed on podcasts, and featured in magazines. For the first time in my life, I felt professionally fulfilled and financially secure. Yet every family gathering was the same. My achievements were footnotes, brief acknowledgments before the conversation moved on to my siblings' accomplishments. Marcus had been promoted to chief of surgery. The twins were handling high-profile cases. David had been headhunted by an even bigger company. These updates were shared with pride, discussed in detail, celebrated with genuine enthusiasm. Meanwhile, my Netflix series premiered to critical acclaim and strong viewership numbers. It was trending on social media, featured in entertainment news, and spawned countless fan theories and discussions online. I was getting fan mail from viewers around the world who connected deeply with my story and characters. Did my family watch it? Mom mentioned she tried to but got confused by all the twists. Dad said he'd recorded it but hadn't found time to watch yet. My siblings had various excuses, too busy with work, not really into thrillers, planning to binge it later when they had time. This brings us to Thanksgiving. Every year, our family gathers at Mom and Dad's house. It's a tradition that started when we were kids, and we've maintained it even as we've all become adults with our own lives. This year felt different for me, though. I was coming off the high of my series being renewed for a second season and having just signed a 3-book deal that would set me up for the next decade. I arrived at my parents' house early to help with preparations, as I always do. Mom was bustling around the kitchen, and I offered to help with the cooking. She handed me the simplest task, arranging store-bought dinner rolls in a basket, while she handled everything else. I didn't mind. Cooking has never been my strength. As the day progressed and my siblings arrived with their families, the familiar dynamics fell into place. Marcus regaled everyone with stories from the hospital. The twins discussed their latest legal victories. David showed off photos from his recent business trip to Tokyo. I listened, smiled, and contributed when I could, but mostly I observed. It wasn't until we all sat down for dinner that Dad announced he wanted to make a speech. This wasn't unusual. Dad loves his Thanksgiving speeches about gratitude and family. But this year, he said he wanted to do something special and acknowledge each of his children individually. My heart actually lifted a little. Maybe this would be different. Maybe he'd finally acknowledge what I'd accomplished. Dad started with Marcus. He spoke glowingly about his eldest son's dedication to saving lives, his leadership at the hospital, what an incredible father and husband he'd become. Marcus beamed, and everyone applauded. Then he moved on to the twins, praising Jessica for her work defending the underprivileged and Jennifer for her success in corporate law. He talked about how proud he was to have raised daughters who were changing the world through justice and advocacy. More applause. When he got to David, Dad's voice grew warm as he discussed his youngest son's business acumen, his rapid rise in the corporate world, and how his marketing innovations were influencing industry standards. David grinned and raised his wine glass in acknowledgement. Then Dad paused, looked around the table, and said, "I'm so grateful for all of my successful children and the pride they bring to our family name." That was it. The speech was over. He sat down to enthusiastic applause and began carving the turkey. I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, waiting for him to continue. Surely he just paused for dramatic effect. Surely my acknowledgement was coming next. But no. The conversation moved on to complimenting Mom on the meal and discussing plans for Christmas. I felt like I'd been slapped. Not just forgotten, actively excluded from the list of children he was proud of. I wasn't successful. I didn't bring pride to the family name. I was invisible. For a moment, I considered speaking up. I thought about interrupting the pleasant dinner conversation to ask, "What about me, Dad? What about your daughter who wrote a best-selling novel and got a Netflix deal?" But I could already picture their uncomfortable faces, the awkward silence, the way they'd make me feel like I was being dramatic or attention-seeking. Instead, I did what I always do. I smiled. I nodded along with the conversation. I complimented Mom on the stuffing and asked David about his upcoming projects. I played my role as the agreeable middle child who doesn't make waves. But inside, something had shifted. A door that had been slowly closing over years of dismissals and oversights finally slammed shut. As the evening wound down, I helped clear the table and wash dishes. I hugged everyone goodbye, promised to see them soon, and wished them safe travels home. I was the picture of a loving daughter and sister. Just before leaving, I asked if we could take a family photo. For my Christmas cards, I said with a bright smile. Everyone gathered around the dining room table, still decorated with Mom's autumn centerpiece and the remnants of our Thanksgiving feast. I set up my phone camera on a timer and rushed to join the group. The photo turned out perfectly. We all looked happy, grateful, like the ideal American family celebrating the holidays together. Dad's arm was around Mom's shoulders. Marcus stood proudly with his wife and kids. The twins flanked David, all of them grinning. And there I was, right in the middle, smiling as if I belonged. I posted a photo to Instagram that night with a caption I'd been mentally composing during the entire drive home. Thanksgiving 2024 with my family. So grateful for everyone in this photo. Today my dad gave a beautiful speech thanking God for all his successful children who bring pride to the family name, his doctor's son who saves lives, his lawyer daughters who fight for justice, and his marketing executive son who's changing the business world. What a blessing to be surrounded by such accomplished people. Some of us may not be acknowledged, but we're thankful just to be here. #family, #Thanksgiving, #grateful, #blessed, #invisible child, #best-selling author, #Netflix, #grateful anyway. I included hashtags that told a real story, #invisible child, #best-selling author, #Netflix, #grateful anyway. Anyone who clicked on my profile would see my bio, neat best-selling author, Netflix series creator, currently invisible at family dinners. Then I went to bed, exhausted by the emotional whiplash of the day. I woke up the next morning to my phone buzzing constantly. The post had exploded overnight. It had thousands of likes, hundreds of comments, and dozens of shares. People were tagging friends, sharing their own stories of family dismissal, and expressing outrage on my behalf. The comments ranged from supportive, "You are incredibly accomplished and deserve recognition," to angry, "Your family should be ashamed," to sharing personal experiences, "This happened to me too, I feel your pain." Several verified accounts from other authors and entertainment industry professionals had liked and commented, drawing even more attention to the post. But the most telling responses came from people who knew my family personally. Former classmates, family friends, neighbors, they were all expressing shock and disappointment at how my achievements had been overlooked. Many mentioned they'd had no idea I was related to the author of the book they'd loved or the series they'd been binge-watching. Mrs. Peterson, who taught all of us in Sunday school growing up, commented, "Sarah, I had no idea you were the author of that wonderful book my book club read last month. Your parents must be so proud. I can't believe they never mentioned it." My high school English teacher wrote, "Sarah, I always knew you had incredible talent. I've recommended your book to countless students and colleagues. You should be so proud of what you've accomplished." Even some of my siblings' friends and colleagues were commenting. A nurse from Marcus's hospital wrote, "Wait, Marcus's sister is S.M. Richardson? I love that book. How did he never mention this?" By noon, the post had been shared to Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. Someone had screenshotted and posted it to Reddit, where it was gaining traction in several subreddits about family dynamics and career achievements. The story was resonating with people who'd felt overlooked or undervalued by their own families. My phone started ringing around 2 p.m. The caller ID showed my mother's number. I considered not answering, but curiosity got the better of me. I picked up on the fourth ring. "Sarah?" Mom's voice was shaky, clearly emotional. "Sarah, honey, I just saw your Instagram post." "Oh, hi Mom. How was your morning?" "Sarah, we need to talk about this post. People are saying things about us. About our family." I could hear Dad in the background, his voice agitated though I couldn't make out the words. "What kind of things are they saying, Mom?" "They're saying we don't support you. That we don't appreciate your success. That we're bad parents." Her voice cracked on the last word, and I could tell she was crying. "And what do you think about what they're saying?" There was a long pause. When Mom spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Sarah, I had no idea you felt this way. I had no idea we made you feel invisible. Mom, I've been a best-selling author for over a year. My book was turned into a Netflix series that millions of people watched. I've been interviewed in major magazines and invited to speak at universities. Last week I signed a deal that will pay me more money than Marcus makes in 3 years. And yesterday, Dad gave a speech thanking God for all his successful children who bring pride to the family name, and he didn't mention me. Oh, honey." Mom's voice broke completely now, and I could hear her sobbing. "Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. We're so sorry. Are you sorry that you hurt me, or are you sorry that other people now know you hurt me?" The question hung in the air between us. I could hear Dad talking more urgently in the background, and then he took the phone. "Sarah, you need to take that post down right now. This is private family business, and you're embarrassing us." And there it was. Even now, even caught red-handed in their dismissal of my achievements, their primary concern was their own image. "Dad, I'm not embarrassing you. I'm telling the truth. You're airing our dirty laundry in public. Your mother is crying, your siblings are getting calls from friends asking what's going on. This needs to stop. What needs to stop is you treating my career like it doesn't matter. What needs to stop is you acting like I'm not successful because my success doesn't look like what you expected. Sarah, be reasonable. We've always been proud of you." "No, Dad. You haven't. And the proof is in yesterday's speech. You thanked God for all your successful children, and I wasn't included in that list." I could hear him struggling for words, probably realizing for the first time how his speech had sounded. We didn't mean. He started, then stopped. It wasn't intentional. That's almost worse, Dad. It means you don't even think about me when you think about success and achievement. Marcus called next, his voice tight with frustration. Sarah, what the hell is going on? My colleagues are asking me why I never mentioned my sister is a famous author. This is humiliating. I'm sorry you're embarrassed that your sister is successful, Marcus. That's not. I'm not embarrassed that you're successful. I just don't understand why you had to blast us on social media. I didn't blast anyone. I posted a family photo and told the truth about what happened. You made us look like assholes. I didn't make you look like anything. I just documented what actually happened. The twins called together, their lawyer training evident in their approach. They tried to negotiate, suggesting I modify the post to be less inflammatory while still expressing my feelings. When I refused, they shifted to veiled threats about defamation and family loyalty. David, surprisingly, was the most direct. Look, Sarah, I get that you're pissed. But this isn't the way to handle it. We're family. We should be able to work this out privately. We are family, David. Which is why it hurts so much that you all treat my career like a cute hobby while celebrating each other's achievements. I don't think we do that. David, can you tell me the name of my book? Silence. Can you tell me what network my series is on? More silence. When did my book become a bestseller? Sarah. These are basic facts about my career, David. If I asked you about Marcus's position at the hospital or the twins' law firms or your company, you'd know all the details. But you don't know anything about what I do because none of you pay attention. By evening, my post had been picked up by several online publications. A blogger who wrote about family dynamics had written an entire article about my experience, using it as a jumping-off point to discuss how creative careers are often undervalued by families. A podcast about sibling relationships had reached out asking if I'd be a guest. The story was spreading beyond my personal social media bubble and becoming part of a larger conversation about how families define success and value achievement. My phone kept ringing, reporters, bloggers, even a producer from a morning show asking if I'd be interested in discussing the viral post on television. I declined most interviews, but the attention was validating in a way I hadn't expected. What I hadn't anticipated was how the viral post would affect my professional life. My literary agent called, breathless with excitement. Sarah, do you realize what's happening? Your book sales have tripled this week. People are buying your novel specifically because of this Instagram post. They want to support you. My publisher was equally thrilled. The controversy had inadvertently become the best marketing campaign they could have asked for. Bookstores were featuring my novel in their windows with signs reading support authors, from invisible to bestseller. Independent bookshops were hosting overlooked authors events, featuring writers whose families didn't understand their careers. The Netflix executives were fascinated by the whole situation. My series producer called to tell me they'd seen a significant spike in viewership. People are binge-watching your show to understand what your family was dismissing, she said. It's incredible. We're already talking about fast-tracking season 3. But the most unexpected response came from other authors. My inbox was flooded with messages from writers at every stage of their careers, debut novelists whose parents still asked when they were getting real jobs, mid-list authors whose siblings treated their books like expensive hobbies, even best-selling authors whose families minimized their success because it wasn't traditional corporate achievement. One message particularly stuck with me. It was from Rebecca Martinez, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist whose family had immigrated from Mexico when she was young. My parents sacrificed everything for me to become successful, she wrote, but they measure success by doctor, lawyer, engineer. When I won the Pulitzer, my mother asked if it came with health insurance. Your post made me realize I'm not alone in this weird limbo of being professionally accomplished but personally invisible to the people who raised me. The solidarity from other creatives was overwhelming. Actors shared stories of families who dismissed their craft until they appeared in blockbuster movies. Musicians talked about parents who called their Grammy nominations nice participation trophies. Visual artists described relatives who asked when they were going to stop playing with paints and get serious about life. A best-selling romance author named Amanda Chen started a hashtag Invisible Accomplishments. Writers, artists, musicians, actors, and other creatives began sharing their stories of family dismissal alongside their actual achievements. The hashtag trended for 3 days, creating a virtual support group for people whose families couldn't see their success. The irony wasn't lost on me that my family's dismissal of my achievements had accidentally created the biggest promotional campaign of my career. My book was selling faster than ever, my Netflix series was trending again, and I was being invited to speak at conferences about family dynamics and creative careers. But the attention also brought unexpected criticism. Some people accused me of being ungrateful, pointing out that my family had supported me financially through college and never actively discouraged my writing. Others suggested I was being dramatic, that my family's oversight wasn't intentional malice but simple ignorance. The harshest criticism came from a blog post titled The Privileged Pain of the Successful Daughter. The author, a freelance writer struggling to make ends meet, accused me of complaining about my family while enjoying the financial security of bestseller success. Some of us would kill for Sarah's problems, she wrote. Her family doesn't understand her success, but at least she has success to misunderstand. The post stung because there was truth in it. I was incredibly privileged to have achieved the level of success I had. My complaints were coming from a place of emotional hurt rather than financial struggle. But the criticism also missed the point that success without recognition from the people you love feels hollow, regardless of how much money you're making. I found myself caught between two narratives: the supporters who saw me as a voice for undervalued creatives, and the critics who saw me as a privileged author complaining about first-world problems. Both perspectives had validity, which made the whole situation more complex than I'd initially realized. The situation became even more complicated when I discovered that my siblings were dealing with their own professional fallout. Marcus's colleagues at the hospital were asking why he'd never mentioned his sister's Netflix series. Several people had approached him at medical conferences, excited to discuss my book, only to be met with his obvious ignorance about my work. Jessica called me, her voice tight with frustration. Do you know how embarrassing it was when the senior partner at my firm asked me about your show and I had to admit I'd never watched it? He's been recommending it to clients, and he assumed I'd at least know the basic plot. Jennifer faced similar awkwardness when a judge mentioned enjoying my book during a court recess, then was surprised to learn she was related to the author but had never read it. The judge actually asked if there were family problems, Jennifer told me. She couldn't understand how I wouldn't know about my sister's best-selling novel. David's situation was perhaps the most ironic. His company's marketing team had actually used my Netflix series as a case study for successful book-to-screen adaptations. He'd sat through a presentation about my show's marketing strategy without ever mentioning that the creator was his sister. When a colleague later discovered the connection through social media, David's credibility took a hit. They think I was hiding it, he told me during one of our difficult phone conversations. Like I was ashamed of you or something. Which I wasn't, I don't know, I just never thought about it. That phrase, I just never thought about it, became a recurring theme in my conversations with my siblings. They weren't maliciously dismissive of my career, they were passively indifferent to it. In some ways, that felt worse than active criticism would have. The professional awkwardness my siblings experienced was an unexpected consequence of my viral post, but it served an important purpose. For the first time, they were feeling the social implications of their ignorance about my work. They were experiencing secondhand the invisibility I'd felt for years. My parents faced their own reckoning. Longtime family friends began asking pointed questions about why they'd never mentioned my achievements. The woman who cut Mom's hair had apparently been reading my book for months, assuming my parents knew and were proud. When she discovered they'd never read it, she was genuinely confused. People keep asking us about your book and your show, Dad said during one of our tense phone calls. We look like idiots because we don't know basic facts about our own daughter's career. How do you think I felt, I replied, when my own family didn't know basic facts about my career? The social pressure my family was experiencing forced them to confront their blind spots in a way that years of my gentle attempts at sharing my achievements hadn't accomplished. They were finally understanding, through their own embarrassment, how dismissive they'd been. But the situation also revealed how little they actually knew about my daily life. During one conversation, Mom asked what time I usually wrote, and I realized she'd never asked about my routine before. Dad wanted to know how long it took to write a book, a question that showed he'd never been curious about my process despite years of me working on novels. The twins started asking about the business side of publishing, advanced payments, royalty structures, film rights, approaching my career with the analytical mindset they applied to their legal work. For the first time, they were treating my profession with the same seriousness they bring to understanding any other business. David, whose marketing background made him the most equipped to understand my success, began asking about promotional strategies and audience building. He seemed genuinely surprised by the complexity and professionalism involved in modern publishing and entertainment marketing. These conversations were positive in one sense: my family was finally showing interest in my work. But they also highlighted how fundamentally they'd misunderstood my career for years. They'd seen me as someone who wrote books as a hobby rather than someone who was building a multimedia entertainment brand. The viral post had forced a reckoning that was long overdue, but the process of rebuilding our relationships on a foundation of actual understanding was going to take time and effort from all of us. 3 days after my post, Mom called again. This time, her voice was calmer, more thoughtful. Sarah, I've been reading the comments on your post. And the articles that people have written about it. I've been doing a lot of thinking. Okay. I owe you an apology. A real apology, not just an I'm sorry you're upset apology. We have been dismissive of your achievements. We have been treating your career like it's not as important or valid as your siblings' careers. I felt a small crack in the wall I built around my heart. I think, Mom continued, we didn't understand what you'd accomplished because it was so far outside our experience. When Marcus became a doctor or the twins became lawyers, we understood what that meant. We knew how to measure their success. But your world, publishing, entertainment, creative industries, it's foreign to us. But Mom, you could have asked. You could have tried to understand. You're absolutely right. And I'm ashamed that we didn't. I'm ashamed that I didn't know what a bestseller list meant until I looked it up this week. I'm ashamed that I had to Google Edgar Award to understand what an honor your nomination was. This was more acknowledgement than I'd ever received from her. I'm ashamed, she went on, that I learned about your Netflix series from Mrs. Henderson instead of celebrating it with you when it happened. Mrs. Henderson watched my show? Sarah, half the neighborhood has watched your show. I've spent 3 days having people ask me why we never mentioned that our daughter is S.M. Richardson. Do you know how that feels? To realize that everyone else in town knows more about my daughter's accomplishments than I do? I could hear the genuine remorse in her voice, but I wasn't ready to forgive yet. How do you think it felt for me to realize that my own family knows less about my accomplishments than strangers on the internet? Oh, honey. I can't imagine. I just can't imagine how much we hurt you. We talked for over an hour. For the first time in my adult life, Mom asked detailed questions about my career. She wanted to understand the publishing process, how television adaptations worked, what my daily life as an author looked like. She admitted that she'd always thought of writing as something I did for fun, not as a legitimate profession. When you were younger, she said, you were always in your room writing stories or painting pictures. It seemed like playing to us. We didn't realize you were developing professional skills, while Marcus was studying to become a doctor and the twins were building debate skills for law school? Yes, and I see now how unfair that was. We saw their activities as career preparation and yours as hobbies. We were wrong. Dad was slower to come around. When he finally called, his apology was stiffer, more formal. He acknowledged that his Thanksgiving speech had been hurtful, but I could tell he still didn't fully understand why. Sarah, I want you to know that I am proud of you. I've always been proud of you. But you don't think I'm successful? I guess I had a narrow definition of success. Doctor, lawyer, business executive, those were the careers I understood and respected. And now? Now I'm learning that success comes in many forms. Your mother has been educating me about your achievements. I had no idea that being on the bestseller list was such a big deal. I had no idea how much money you were making or how many people were reading your work. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. My siblings were slower to apologize, and their apologies were more grudging. Marcus called it a misunderstanding and said he'd always supported my writing. The twins maintained that they'd always been proud of me, but admitted they could have been more vocal about it. David was the most honest, acknowledging that he'd never really paid attention to my career because it wasn't something he understood or related to. But the real change came at Christmas. I almost didn't go to the family gathering. The Thanksgiving incident was still fresh, and I wasn't sure I was ready to sit through another holiday dinner where my achievements were minimized or ignored. But Mom called personally to invite me, and something in her voice convinced me to give them another chance. When I arrived at my parents' house, I immediately noticed changes. There was a copy of my book prominently displayed on the coffee table in the living room. Mom had printed and framed several of the positive reviews from major publications and hung them in the hallway alongside Marcus's medical school diploma and the twins' law degrees. During dinner, Dad asked detailed questions about my second book. He wanted to know about my writing process, my research methods, and my plans for the Netflix series' second season. The questions were thoughtful and genuine, not just polite conversation starters. When it came time for Dad's Christmas speech, my heart started racing. I braced myself for another slight, another oversight. But this time was different. This year has been a year of learning for me, Dad began. I've learned that success comes in many forms, and I've learned that I haven't always been the father I should have been to all of my children. He looked directly at me as he said this. I want to specifically acknowledge my daughter Sarah, who has achieved something remarkable that I failed to recognize or celebrate properly. Sarah is a New York Times best-selling author whose book has been read by hundreds of thousands of people around the world. She created a story that was compelling enough to become a Netflix series watched by millions. She has been nominated for prestigious awards and has built a career that impacts people's lives through storytelling. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. I am proud of all my children, he continued, for the different ways they contribute to the world. Marcus saves lives through medicine. Jessica and Jennifer fight for justice through law. David creates innovative marketing strategies that help businesses thrive. And Sarah creates stories that entertain, inspire, and touch people's hearts. The applause that followed felt different from the polite clapping at Thanksgiving. It felt genuine, enthusiastic, and long overdue. After dinner, something unprecedented happened. My siblings started asking real questions about my work. Marcus wanted to know if I'd ever consider writing medical thrillers. The twins were curious about the legal aspects of publishing contracts and television deals. David asked for advice on storytelling techniques for his marketing presentations. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like my expertise was valued and respected by my family. The Instagram post that had caused such an uproar was still up, and it continued to generate comments and shares months later. It had become a touchstone for people who felt undervalued or invisible in their own families. I received messages from teachers whose families didn't understand their passion for education, artists whose parents wanted them to get real jobs, and entrepreneurs whose relatives dismissed their business ventures as risky pipe dreams. My story had resonated because it wasn't really about me, it was about the universal need for recognition and validation from the people we love most. It was about how families sometimes fail to see their members clearly because they're looking through the lens of their own expectations and experiences. The aftermath of my viral post taught me several important lessons. First, that speaking up for yourself isn't selfish or dramatic, it's necessary. I had spent years accepting my family's dismissal of my achievements, telling myself that their opinion didn't matter, that I didn't need their validation. But the truth was, it did matter, and I didn't need it. Not because my worth depended on their approval, but because family relationships work best when they're built on mutual respect and genuine support. Second, I learned that sometimes people need a wake-up call to recognize their blind spots. My parents weren't malicious in their dismissal of my career, they were genuinely ignorant about what I'd accomplished and what it meant. They needed the shock of public embarrassment to force them to examine their biases and assumptions. Third, I discovered that my experience was far from unique. The thousands of people who responded to my post, shared their own stories, and reached out privately showed me that family dynamics around success and achievement are complicated for many people. Parents and siblings often struggle to understand and value accomplishments that fall outside their own experience or expectations. Finally, I learned that authentic relationships require honesty, even when that honesty is uncomfortable. The months following my viral posts were awkward and sometimes painful as my family and I worked to rebuild our dynamics on a foundation of genuine understanding and respect. But those difficult conversations led to stronger, more authentic relationships than we'd ever had before. My second book was published 8 months later to even greater success than my first. This time, my family's response was completely different. Dad pre-ordered copies for all his friends. Mom organized a launch party at their house. My siblings promoted it on their own social media accounts and bought copies for their colleagues and clients. When the book debuted at number 3 on the bestseller list, I got congratulatory calls from every family member within an hour of the announcement. Marcus sent flowers. The twins opened a bottle of champagne in my honor during their weekly sister dinner. David created a social media campaign to promote the book to his professional network. The contrast with their previous responses was striking, but it didn't feel hollow or performative. It felt like genuine pride and excitement from family members who had finally learned to see and value my achievements. Looking back, I don't regret posting that Instagram caption. It was messy and public and caused temporary pain for people I love. But it was also necessary. Sometimes you have to burn bridges to build better ones. Sometimes you have to make noise to be heard. Sometimes you have to risk comfortable family dynamics to create honest ones. The little girl who used to hide in her room writing stories never imagined that one of those stories would someday expose family secrets on the internet and spark a national conversation about success and family dynamics. But that's the thing about being a storyteller, sometimes life gives you plot twists you never saw coming, and sometimes the most important story you tell is your own. My relationship with my family isn't perfect now, but it's real in a way it never was before. They see me clearly, they value my contributions, and they understand that success comes in many forms. And I've learned to advocate for myself, to expect the respect I deserve, and to never again smile and stay silent when I'm being overlooked or dismissed. That Thanksgiving photo is still on my Instagram, along with a caption that changed everything. I keep it there not as a reminder of the hurt, but as a testament to the power of speaking your truth, even when your voice shakes, even when it causes disruption, even when it forces everyone, including yourself, to confront uncomfortable realities. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate plotting or calculated payback. Sometimes it's simply refusing to be invisible anymore, telling your story in your own words, and letting the truth speak for itself. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is smile, take a photo, and tell the world exactly what happened. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the people who hurt you will listen, learn, and love you better than they ever have before.